You know what? Some riding days are just that perfect little zone. You find yourself in the pocket. Perfect day, perfect scenery, perfect distance. And this was one of those days. And it's hard to believe that this is where we are. I think this is day 18 of the trip that we're starting on here. And this is the last episode of this series. And we'll be covering out the last 4 or 5 days of the trip that we've been gone. And it's hard to believe that when we add up the series, that we've been gone for 23 days. It's unbelievable how much stuff we've seen. This here is Chokoot Lake, which is a little bit north of Haines, Alaska, where we left off in the last episode. Chokoot Lake is a beautiful little recreational park or recreational area that is broadly known as one of the most beautiful lakes in Alaska, and it lived up to its name, although we were promised grizzly bears, and there were not any, so I was somewhat disappointed by that. Filling in its place was this ferry ride from Haines, Alaska to Skagway, Alaska, which, from what I understand, is the Disneyland of the Alaskan cruise adventure. When we came into port here, there was 4 or 5 far larger ships that were sitting in harbor, and the little town was just packed. Actually, kind of reminded me of a Banff or a Jasper sort of a setup. But leaving out of Skagway, going northbound, we are climbing up into the mountains. What we will be spending the next few minutes in here is the White Pass. Now, I'd say that I'm not one to pass judgment, but clearly I am, and I'm going to hit to this even though it's a little bit of a under-the-belt sort of an attack for Alaska. There is an unusual number of places in Alaska that are called Dead Horse this or Dead Horse that. This is called Dead Horse Pass. Go to the north at the end of the Dalton, Dead Horse again. Now, from what I understand, it all comes back to this idea that they went there, they were ill-prepared, winter kicked them around a little bit, so they ate a horse. And for some reason, they wanted to celebrate that and just called everything Dead Horse. Now, it's easy enough to look back on that and laugh at this point. That's a little bit odd, but it does give you a pretty good indication of how often that was a problem here. Although, I will state for the record that I don't remember there being a dead horse in the Yukon, so maybe they just did it better. Now, I have to send a quick thank you out to somebody that suggested in my pre-launch video that we add Haines and Skagway into our trip, and I did because it sounded interesting once I looked down on the map. And the road down into Haines, as we covered in the last episode, is beautiful. It goes along a fjord and a river, and you get to see the mixing of the salt water and the fresh water, but just beautiful with the trees and the towering landscape. And then you take the ferry up to Skagway. From the Skagway, you're taking this White Pass, or Dead Horse Pass if we want to get into it, all the way up to White Horse, and it's this scarred terrain, this gigantically wide valley with just almost flat bottom, but it looks like some kid was playing with a Tonka truck and just kind of putting things in cool little piles and making waterfalls, and then added food coloring to all these lakes. It reminds me a little bit of the coloration of the ink lots in Banff, but the high mineralization was suggested to us that it wasn't great to drink from, but thankfully we had filtration, so we did anyway, because it's like that lake there that we were looking at. You could see the bottom for like a mile out. It was incredibly clear and neat. But you could stop at one of 7 million lakes along this way, and you wouldn't have been wasting your time. Now, we've been on the road at this point by 19 days, and we'd been eating a whole pile of peanut butter mixed with oatmeal for our breakfast, so I took the chance there to take one of the fascinating little cultural restaurants in Whitehorse. It's a great place cuisine-wise, but Burnt Toast Cafe is highly recommended. This is Emerald Lake, which is about 45 minutes south from Whitehorse. The blue coloration there comes from a combination of calcium chlorate and marl, which I had to look up what that was, but apparently it's another kind of carbonate. It also makes the water very hypoxic, so even though it's beautiful, there is hardly a living creature inside of it. This park here is one of my favorites. I've spent a significant amount of time in Whitehorse working out of it, and it is Miles Canyon, so if you get a chance when you're in Whitehorse, definitely check that out. Lots of cool trails to go down. In the background there, you will see a bike that is under a cover and a gentleman in a tent there. I won't describe who he is in case he finds this video, but the interesting story around this is that bike is a Super Tenere, which is roughly a 550 or 600 pound bikes. And for reference, our bikes are about 300 pounds. Twice in the course of 48 hours while we were there, while trying to turn around the bike jumped him and ended up pinning him to the ground. So for those of you that are thinking that big adventure bikes are the only way to do this, that is not true. Our bikes are half the weight of that. We did this trip, did it spectacularly, and my bike didn't jump me at any point. So think about it before you get the big bikes. It's not the only way to do this. As we were coming south out of Whitehorse to Watson Lake and then down through the Alaskan Highway to Dawson City, you'll see a ton of wildlife, particularly around the Muncho Lake area. As you cross back into BC and northern Alberta, there's buffalo off to the side there and another herd here. I don't know if I've ever been through this area where you don't end up driving through a herd of buffalo, but they're very sedate. But one of the highlights you have when coming back down is Liard Hot Springs. This is one of my favorite places in Canada. This whole area is a hot spring wetland, and it's been, as you can see, it's prepared so that it kind of still stays natural-ish to what it would have originally been. The water comes out of the limestone up at the off to the right there, and then it goes down this river into two separate pathways that kind of get continuously colder as you get further away. But it's one of the coolest hot springs that I've ever been to. Absolutely worth stopping in. Now the road from Watson Lake down to Fort St. James and eventually Fort Nelson is just absolutely beautiful with so many things to see. This here is the beginnings of Muncho Lake Provincial Park, which leads into Stone Mountain Provincial Park. But Muncho Lake here on the right is also one of my favorite places in Canada, mostly because it's a very, very interesting motorcycle ride. It is basically perfect pavement for about 10 kilometers, just riding along the coast of this, or the shoreline of this stunning lake. In the right light, it's kind of an emeraldy color, but even when it's not great light, it is just transparent. And at the end of it is this beautiful place. There is a lodge at the north end. Don't stay there. There's a place on the south here that looks like it's probably shut down and dilapidated, but it's this cool little motel with a restaurant that I believe is called Jack's. It is the best 1950 diners with an old angry guy running it that I travel in into the north. Has his own eggs and meats that are made there, and just provides just a beautiful, great breakfast, and you get all of the sass that you could possibly swallow with it. So I hope you see this video, Jack. Every time you offend me, but it is awesome, and I say that in jest. I love your restaurant and your motel there. As you can see here, our luck did not improve with the rain. Our rain escalated into heavy rain, and then it escalated into hail, which you're going to see here. It's funny, those guys flashing their lights think they're warning us about the hail, but they have no idea the hail that they were going to be coming into the other way. That hurt. Those were probably, they weren't quite golf ball size. They were probably about half the size of a golf ball, but when you're doing 100, 110 kilometers an hour, that hurts. For those of you that are wondering if the bikes would make the journey without any problems, James here is holding the only carnage from an OEM part that died on our trip. His clutch cable blew up outside of Fort St. John, and we were able to fix it before we continued on. But sure enough, it was during the rain, because it was always going to be during the rain. But it just adds to the adventure, so that's good. Now we're getting to the end of the adventure here. We're coming across the prairies and getting back to the St. Albert, Alberta area. But there will be a synopsis kind of in a follow-up of how this trip went, and more of just a sit-down style. And I'm going to compile this into a movie just because I've never made something this long over this big of an adventure. But I do need to send a big thank you to my wife for permitting us to do this. It's been a dream of mine for a long time to take my kids up to the north, and I am looking forward to doing something like this similar in 2 years with my daughter. So just thanks for joining us, and we will see you in the movie. But also thank you to everybody that's been sending encouragement in the comments. It's been much appreciated.